Welcome to the third episode of this Wisdom Template Livewire. So let's again just remind ourselves of where we are so far. We've been looking at the process of wisdom, but in particular we've been looking at this template, these 6 elements of wisdom to help us make balanced and good decisions. We've also mentioned that foolishness is not so much a lack of wisdom, but I would suggest an imbalance of wisdom where we're pulled in a certain direction, we have a certain way of thinking that's not that balanced. And a fool, in my mind at least, is someone who doesn't lack wisdom, but they do lack self-discipline. Maybe they're just going with what they want to go with, not the wholeness or holistic wisdom that God is given to them. We're basing the template off Edward de Bono's book, and he has this 6 thinking hats idea, which I think is really helpful. We've altered it, we've created a template out of it, we've really connected it to biblical wisdom. So let's proceed and let's see what we're going to talk about today is how to communicate wisely. There's nothing as frustrating, I think, as having a great idea, but people not believing you or getting on board or understanding what you're trying to communicate. There's this template that we've got, which is great. It will help you to, I think, become more wise if you use this template. However, on its own, it's not going to help you maybe to convince other people. You may have great ideas, you may have great plans, but how do you then convince others? Because pretty much most of what we do involves other people. Most of our plans, most of our ideas involve other people. So how do we help them connect with us and partner with us? The Word of God tells us that Jesus became wise and he grew strong. God was pleased with him and so were the people. I always think this is an amazing statement that Jesus became wise. You would think that verse would say Jesus was wise and he was strong. But he became wise and his influence became stronger. I always find that's fascinating. There's probably a lot we could delve into there, but the main thing to think about is if he needed to become wiser, so do we. There's a difference, isn't there, between character. Jesus had the perfect character, but character and ability and talent and wisdom, they're different things. So he grew in some areas. I don't think he had like a perfect personality because there's not one personality that's everything. But in character he's perfect, but he had to grow in wisdom, which is fascinating. But the other part of this is interesting to me, is this idea that he influenced and pleased other people, because what he thought and what he said, he communicated really wisely. How do we do that? Well, perhaps the main thing we need to do is avoid the most basic mistake of communication. I want to kind of share this through a quick story. Many years ago, when we had the first team going into schools, we decided we were going to do a lesson on Christianity. We were asked in an English school to do a lesson on Christianity. Specifically, we were asked to talk about who was Jesus. And so we learned from C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis had this trilemma that Jesus could have been mad, bad, or God, but he couldn't have been just a nice person. So the idea was you explain to people he's either, because of things that Jesus did and said, he was either God, or he was mad, or he was bad. He couldn't have been just a nice person. It's a great idea. We took this lesson in. We were super creative, really, really fun. On the way back in the car, I had this nagging doubt. And I said to the team, do you think the kids understood us? And everybody said, yeah, I'm sure they did. They had a great time. They understood us. And I said to them, why do you think they understood us? And to a person, the whole of the team said the same thing. Well, we understood it. It made sense to us. But I still had this nagging doubt. And so that night, during the evening, we gave up our evening to change the lesson because we did about something like 21 lessons that week. So we just done the first couple. We changed it for the rest of the week that evening. We went back in the morning. And I said to the teacher, I hope you don't mind. I know the lesson's supposed to be the same every time, but we've changed it a little bit because I wasn't sure that the young people really understood it. And the teacher said to me, well, actually, that's really good. They absolutely loved the lesson. They really enjoyed it. Generally, they understood you, but I think your main point was lost. She said, let me show you a typical bit of feedback we got. And she showed me this little feedback that this kid had written, and he wrote this. I used to think Jesus was God, but now I think he was mad or bad. Which is the opposite. I kind of, even to this day, feel a bit guilty about that. What was the basic problem? The basic problem was this. We thought because we understand it, they'll understand it. But the reality is people understand things in different ways. And so, again, with this idea of trying to help us not need our leaders all the time and be able to think ourselves, how do we communicate? I created a kind of second part of the template, which is how to communicate to the different types of people and the different types of wisdom. So, for instance, if someone is primarily a white hat thinker, they're going to want you to prove to them you've done the research. No matter how convincing, how excited you are, they're going to want to know, have you done the research? If they're a red hat thinker, they're going to want you to assure them that you've seen the problem, that you know what the problem is. If you ignore the problem, they're just going to be unsettled. If you don't seem to be thinking about a problem, then it's going to worry them, no matter how good your idea or your plan is. If they're a yellow hat thinker, they're going to want you to make them feel excited. Maybe the rational ideas and the logic aren't going to really help them. That was my problem. I've had to change the way I preach over the years because I would preach in a very kind of fairly creative, logical, strategic, rational way. But there were people who just needed to make me excited. And I wasn't doing that. I was excited, but I didn't show it. So some people need that. Well, what could happen? What could the outcome be? Make me excited. If they're blue hat thinkers, show me your conviction. I'll get on board, but I need to know you're really in this. You're in this for the long term. You know, people, when you share a vision, generally people buy into you before they buy into it. They want to know you're going to see this through. Because if they're going to get on board, they don't want to get on board with something and you're out of there if a better option comes along. So show me your conviction. Show me why you're committed to this. If they're a black hat thinker, explain to me how this makes sense. This is a crazy idea. It's weird. I don't mind it being full of faith, but explain to me how this makes sense. And then finally, the green hat thinker is asking, can you illustrate its uniqueness? Are we just doing the things like we've always done before? Is there anything unique or strategic about this that's good? So I thought, well, how do we connect with everybody in the room? You know, if I speak somewhere and there's 1,000 people in the room, it's going to be made up of people who think in different ways. Now I can just go there like I did 30 years ago, wherever it was, in that classroom and share it the way I want to hear it. But now I've got to think, how do I share it for all these other different types of people? And so I came up with a slightly different template just to help you. So present the data and unpack the research if you want to get the white hat thinkers on board. If you want to get the red hat thinkers on board, describe the problem and the workaround. Say, here's the problem. Let me explain the problem to you, but here's how we're going to work around that problem. If they're a yellow hat thinker, be enthusiastic and paint a picture. That's what Jesus did. He painted a picture with words in people's minds of the kingdom of heaven. He inspired them. The way you inspire people is you paint a picture of this is what it looks like. You don't give them statistics. You don't give them a soundbite. You paint a picture in their mind. You help them imagine they're living in it right now. For the blue hat thinkers, share your story and your scripture. Share them how God spoke to you. If God did, don't make it up. Don't pretend God spoke to you just because you've got a good idea and you want to convince them. Don't use the God card. But if you do have some kind of conviction, then share it with them. Share your story. Maybe your conviction comes from your story. Maybe you went through this, and because of your experience, you're really committed to this. If they're a black hat thinker, connect to history and how this is the next step. On my wall at home, I have this little phrase. If you want to shoot an arrow into the future, the further you want to shoot an arrow, the further back you have to pull back on the bowstring. So the bigger the vision you want to share, the more of the history you need to share as well. So when Peter gets up on the day of Pentecost, or when Paul argues his case and they talk about what God's about to do, they often refer back to what God has done. They explain this is the next obvious step. You can see what God's done. You can see how this fits. This is what God's going to do next. And then finally, explain why it's unique and why it's better. Why is this unique and why is it better? Explain that. So what I thought I would do is later on we're going to collaborate, and you're going to take the idea you came up with in the first episode and you apply the template in the second episode. At the end of this episode, we're going to collaborate together, and you're going to think, how would I present my vision? How would I present my idea? How would I communicate wisely? What I want to do is I want to give you an example. So I want to give you an example of what I would normally do when I go to a church and talk about what I do. And I want you, as you listen to this, to see if you can spot the 6 elements of wisdom. So make a note of it. And then afterwards in the collaboration, you can see who missed it. Did I miss anything out? Have I left anything out on purpose? Or is it all in there? So let's take a look at my example. So I'm going to share with you what I would normally share with a church, particularly in the US, about what we do, asking them to partner with us to reach into schools. So this is the kind of thing I would say. Hi, let me just tell you my story for a start. I became a Christian because of a teacher at school who shared with me their faith. And after hearing them, they told me I could pray. And I had a skin disease, and I prayed and asked God to heal me. And he healed me, which was amazing, which meant I was really excited about telling people about Jesus, because I realized that Jesus was real, and the Bible was real, and heaven was real. But I also realized that hell was real, and so was the devil. And I really needed to tell people about Jesus. So what I wanted to do was to reach into schools. And so I gathered a team around me, and we had opportunity to go into our local schools in England. And in England, you have to teach the 6 world faiths. And so Christianity has to be taught in school. And so that's what we did. We went into schools and we taught Christianity. It was great. That was almost 30 years ago. We started in England. Since then, we're now operating in 20 nations around the world. And we're looking at another 6 nations that we're about to partner with and work in the schools, connecting with young people there as well. So before COVID, this is a picture of all the young people that graduated that we trained and put into teams to partner with churches. Every one of these worked with a church, went into schools to connect young people from the schools into the church. What we found is what we do works all around the world. This young lady became a Christian through the work of the Pais team, and eventually she went into her community, reaching young people using the methodology that we use as well. Now, this is in America. Now, obviously in America we have a separation of church and state, and you might be thinking, well, can this really work? And why is it so important? Well, what you might be surprised to know is that 94% of people who make a decision to follow Jesus do that before the age of 18, which of course means they're mainly in schools. That means only 6% of people who become Christians do that after the age of 18. So where are we putting all our efforts? Where are we putting our resources? Where are we putting our people? 90% of American students attend a public school. There's another percentage that attend private schools. So over 90% of the young people we want to reach, who are at the time when they're making up their minds about what they think about God, where are they? They're in school. Do we have to buy the building? No. Do we have to pay the staff? No. Do we have to run the building, the gas, the electric? No. Someone else does that for us. So if we really want to make a difference in our world, it's obvious the place we need to go is schools. Now you might be thinking, well, the problem is, what if we partner with Pais and we have a team and they've got nothing to do all year because they can't get into schools? Well, let me encourage you, we can get into schools. Here's some testimonies, some references. We have many others from school teachers in the USA. We've figured out a way, and we can explain that to you later, how we can not only just get into schools, but we don't argue our way into schools. We're invited into schools because of what we do. And we also have other methodology that our young teams can do outside of the school as well, with the young people on the streets or in the communities or in church as well. So this is in India. Sometimes you might be thinking, well, maybe this is just an English thing. Well, Clem, he came to England to train to do what we do. He went back to India, said to his pastor, can I try these things out? And initially his pastor said, well, that's an English thing or maybe an American thing. But he gave him 6 months to try getting into schools. He gave him 6 months to try the methodology. It went so well, he literally gave him a wife. And her name is Hanani. And now they lead the Pais teams in Chennai, India together. America may be a little bit difficult, but is it more difficult than Islamabad? Because these are our teams that are working in schools, public schools, that have invited them into Islamabad. We would love to partner with you. What we can do is we can offer you a team. It makes sense because it's economical. So our team will come. You don't have to buy a building. You don't have to pay the team. We'll create a partnership where they'll stay with host families in your church. You don't have to pay them. We'll train the team. We'll take care of the ring of the day-to-day of what they do. We'll make sure that we raise the money to provide their training, and they'll work for you, bridging the gap between the schools and the church. Let me just tell you a story. This is Alex. Alex is on the left. He was in Nigeria. He was with his 5 friends, and they were living on the streets. They were homeless. They didn't go to school. They didn't go to church. And they had a fungus on their feet. And one day our Pais team met with Alex and his friends, and they took them to the hospital to get their feet sorted. But then with Alex, they found he wanted to know more about God, so they got him based in a church, and they got him going to school as well. And then Alex eventually became a team leader. Here's Alex on the right. And in the middle is Faith, another gentleman who is part of his team. So he trains them in what we've trained Alex to do. And then these are the disciples of Faith. So this is what we do. It's a little bit unique. We're not here to entertain young people. We're here to mobilize young people. And that will work. 85% of young people who were going to church in their last year of high school have dropped out by the end of the first year at college. Why is that? It's because we've protected their faith, not helped them prove it. If a Pais team comes to your church, what we will do is we will do different kinds of things that are happening in most youth ministry in America right now. We will mobilize them, not simply entertain them. We have a high standard, a high vision for what they can achieve. We're not going to babysit them. They're going to be some of the most dynamic people in your church. Your church will change when they affect them. I went to a church in California a while back. I went twice. The second time I went and said, the atmosphere is different to the pastor. He said, it is. He says, since these young adults have come in, they've energized our people, and our people are thinking about mission a little bit more. So maybe you'd consider partnering with us. We'll bring the Pais Youth Academy so the church will help train and mobilize young people. We'd love to partner with you, and you can find out more information at thepaismovement.com. Okay, so if you noticed, there were 6 elements of wisdom in that presentation. You can discuss it and look at it and think about it a little bit later on. Let me just finish with this. Let's just remind ourselves of the process of wisdom. To hear, to discern, to become. In 1988, the government of Britain decided that every school in Britain should have an act of Christian worship every single day. The Bible should be read out, a hymn should be sung. And then they said, if no teacher is willing to do it, you can ask the local churches to come in. I would love to tell you that every church in Britain responded. Every church sent young people into those schools. But we hardly lifted a finger. At some point that will change, that law will go away, and we'll probably complain about it. But did we take the opportunity? We all heard the opportunity. Many churches didn't discern the opportunity though. A few did. My church did. The church I served did. And it's not part of what we do. That's a negative side. We can hear, discern, and become, or we can hear and not discern it's God and not become. I just wonder if in the last 30 years the church had mobilized and focused on schools, if Christianity in Britain would be very, very different from what it is today. So where does faith come from? Faith comes from hearing. You need to hear, you need to discern, and then you'll become wise. And wisdom is incredibly valuable today. You are going to be incredibly valuable to this world if you can become wise. So please, let's collaborate. Let's download the document. Let's discuss the questions, do the activity, and let's disciple others in what we've learned today.
Hello, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Livewire. If you're interested in finding out more about this topic, I'd like to recommend the book Kingdom Patterns: How to Discover God's Direction.